Good morning, y'all. How are y'all doing? I have been looking forward to this all week because I have a few things that I want to share with you that not many people grow that I feel, and some of them maybe you grow, but wanted to share this for some flower farmers out there and florists because this is products that if you ask your growers, your farmers, the people who supply you with local blooms for some of these things, then you might start seeing them available. But sometimes farmers don't know about them or they've never tried growing them. And if they know there's interest, they might do a little trial or a little experiment. So I want to show a few of those things. I'm really stoked. A couple days ago, we had our 5-year anniversary for when we started the Flower Podcast. And if you haven't subscribed to the Flower Podcast, I really would love to encourage you to do that. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of the major podcast platforms. We're there, and you can subscribe and automatically get the podcast every week that we release new episodes that you might find. Great conversations with people all over the world. I know we're getting ready to release an episode with a flower distributor and farmer in Australia coming up soon. And some of the flowers he grows, you will be like, you've never seen these things before. I've never seen some of these things before. So, really kind of cool and exciting. I also want to make sure to let you know, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, be sure to do that because you'll get notified when we go live or when we release new videos, whether it's the video portions of our interviews or whatever. So anyway, couple things. Let's do some updates first because I think sometimes updates are kind of fun. Now here's an unexpected one that I wasn't planning on, but last night I saw it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to share this. So a couple weeks ago, yeah, I think it's been 2 weeks now, we shared one of the flowers that I think you should be growing if you aren't. It's in the mint family, and I'm going to forget which variety it is. We'll post it in the notes and I'll share it. But we shared it a few weeks ago. And it's this mint right here. And some people call it a mountain mint. I think is it manicum? I don't know. Anyway, it's a great filler. It has this silvery soft foliage and it has a little teeny tiny white flower there. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I think it's pretty cool. Reason why I want to show this again is because we have had this for 2 weeks in water, and we used floral food with it, and it was cut a week before that. And this was a bunch that was left over in our wholesale house, which we don't usually have because usually we sell out of it every time. But I grabbed one because I wanted to show you guys this. Can you believe it's still lasting. We have recut it a couple times and we did change the water and give it some fresh floral food. But that's 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And you can't tell me your customers wouldn't be amazed having something that lasts that long, especially as a filler. A lot of times fillers don't last super long. And it has that kind of mentholy, I don't know, that's not a word really, but menthol, spearmint, peppermint kind of fragrance to it. And I think it's really special. And there's several different varieties. This particular one is really, really great. And I know from the local grower that I spoke with about this, that's growing this, she said, the first year they were kind of short and stocky and it was very prolific, but not as much as the second year. So it died down to the ground. We had some super, super cold weather, but it came back and it came back super thick. So the stems were a little thinner. So she ends up putting a few more stems in a bunch, but the stems were, I think 5 feet tall, some of them. So, they're super tall and incredibly prolific. I don't think she'll ever have to plant more because sometimes even the reseeding of it can be really thick and popular. But anyway, so this is one of the mountain mints, and we'll post the name of it in our show notes at some point here soon. All right. So another update I wanted to give you guys was our sunflowers. We planted some sunflowers back on the 10th. Now, we had an episode where Syngenta supplied me with some seeds, and this is Sunfinity. And they've been in the tray now for exactly a month Monday. So this is Saturday, so in 2 days it'll be a month. And they're ready to go put out. In fact, I was just doing a little test here, and I wanted to show you one thing because it's always good to be super observant. So you can see they've got roots going on there, and it's good. It's a good healthy plug, and it's ready to be planted. But I don't know if you can see, you see that little hole? That little hole in the leaf? Well, I was just looking down and I saw a couple holes. I mean, not a lot, couple. And I'm like, that looks like it could be a caterpillar. And even in the tray outside, because I'm trying to get them toughened up, so when I plant them outside, they're ready to go. I noticed a couple little caterpillars on here, little teeny tiny green ones, and I found them and got rid of them because they definitely will go to town on a lot of these things. So you have to always keep an eye out for things that just don't look normal, things that don't look special. So anyway, we are going to talk about some dahlias today, among some other things, but I want to give you one last update. So these are my soil blocks that I've started. I've got some other ones too, and they're all starting to sprout for the most part. This is agastache. It's some people call it anise hyssop, and this one will have a purple flower. Now you can see that I got a little heavy on the seeds, and I tried to just use the toothpick method like Lisa Ziegler shows and put just a few on each one, but I guess when they get stuck we got a lot. Maybe we'll do some dividing once they get bigger, but I can't wait to plant these. Hopefully we're gonna get these cut before it frosts, and I'm really hoping maybe to even save some seed from it. But this kind of has a licorice smell to it, has a purple little soft column, kind of reminds you of like a Veronica, but it's much more loose. It's just, I don't know, kind of like a bottle brush looking purple, lavender purple kind of flower. So anyway, so let's talk about some new flowers that maybe you've not grown before. And we're going to talk about some dahlias here towards the end, but I wanted to show you this. So a lot of people grow amaranthus, and a lot of people grow red and green because that's the most popular ones, historically speaking. But then we started seeing some of these. Look at this beauty here. Some of these, I don't know what color you call it. This particular one I believe is Coral Fountain. And you can see that it's kind of a peachy, rusty color. I love this variety, and in the fall season especially, this is very popular. We get some requests for it in the spring, but very, very few. And honestly, it takes so many days to kind of get these tall, beautiful stems that that I don't know that it's really practical for the spring. But for the late summer, like starting now through, oh gosh, November, this is probably one of our most popular colors to sell. I mean, red is always going to be popular. Green is always going to be popular. But as far as a new color, this one I think probably outsells both of those when you put them side by side. So this is really kind of fun. This is Coral Fountain. I do know that one of our sponsors, Farmer Bailey, I think you can buy plugs for these through them, which might help save you some time, or you can start it from seed. But this color goes with so many of the wedding palettes. I know with like the rose we showed last time, Moab, when it opens, can you imagine Moab with this? It would be so beautiful, or the quicksands, or any of the gold colors. I do have like a dahlia here. I don't know which dahlia this is, and I'll explain that a little bit later, but look at that. I mean, isn't that really beautiful? I feel like that is a great color to go with it. Also, I have, oh, here's another one. We're gonna talk about dahlias here in a minute. Look, even this yellow, look how those colors go together. Isn't that amazing? So I don't know, I just think it's something to think about. Growing, if you haven't grown this kind of a peachy coral color, which is what they call this. Now, when you go and you're looking for seeds or plants, there's a couple other varieties I'm thinking of, like I think it's called Hot Biscuits, and some of the gold amaranths, which you would think that would be such a great variety for fall. I'm just gonna tell you that if I had to choose between Coral Fountain and one of those more gold color varieties, I would choose this. And sometimes I think it's because of shelf life. The more gold colors like Hot Biscuit and some of those, I don't know, I just don't feel like they have the same shelf life as some of these varieties. This was grown here in the US, this was grown in California, and we trucked it in here to Nashville. But it's an amazing variety, Coral Fountain. It's really great. All right, so let's look at some other things. You know, fragrance is a big part of floral design. And it's not really as part of the design as much as customers expect it or always look for it. How many times do they get a vase of flowers and they go to smell an individual bloom or a bouquet? And that's where things like mints and things like that are really great. Well, I wanted to share this mint. This mint is kind of, it has a little bit of variegation to it. I'm not sure if you can see that, but it has a little bit of variegation. It's very elongated. You can see it's starting to go into bloom. It's very hardy. This particular one is probably about a week old. This though is not, I don't think this is as aggressive as a variety to grow as some of the other ones, but the thing I love about this is what's unexpected. It's called apple mint, and it has a different kind of scent to it. It's very unexpected. So when you are doing bouquets, doing designs, even for your markets, I think it's just kind of a fun. Here's a few stems. You can see this sponge probably has about 20 stems in it, which might seem a lot, but when mint gets going, it can be aggressive. It wants to take over. But again, unexpected fragrance, I think, is really great when it comes to bouquets and designs. Even for a market, like a farmer's market, people want to stick their nose in that bouquet and see, is it fragrant? And of course, a lot of times, you know, a big flower like a dahlia is going to be the flower they go to first. But isn't this kind of cool that if you can tuck these kinds of things into your bouquets, that it gives that sort of unexpected little like wow factor? So this is an apple mint, and it is a variegated variety. And I may try to root this. I'm not sure if it'll root or not since it's getting ready to go into bloom, but I may try just to see, because I don't think this is as an aggressive variety of mint as some of the other ones. Some are extremely aggressive. Now, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to tap them in the comment box down below, and I'm going to try to see them. For some reason, sometimes the comments want to show up, and then sometimes they don't. And let's see here if we can do this. Maybe we'll see if that helps. Anyway, one of the flowers that, you know, this time of year with 4th of July, red, white, and blue is always very popular. And this is Echinops. And a lot of people want to grow orangiums, and there's so many different ones. I can't even, I don't know. Being that we do import some, there's like Dynamite and there's Alpine. There's all these little miniature ones. There's bigger ones like Supernova. You can get them from Holland. You get all these different kinds. And they are great. In fact, I think I showed some a couple weeks ago. There was a blue one and a white one. If you go back in the lives here on YouTube, you can see them. But this is Echinops. And the reason why I love Echinops is it has this silvery blue. And I like it even in this greener stage. Like, look at this. Like, that is great. This is kind of an in-between stage. And then you can see it getting more blue as it gets more developed. And I will say that it's sticky. It has little tiny little like needles on the foliage. So when you reach into it, it's good to have long sleeves on or some kind of protective gear on to help with harvesting them. Now, another thing I love about this is if you sell dried bouquets, dry wreaths, dry flowers of any kind, Echinops makes a great dried flower. So you can dry this, hang it upside down. You can, which is what I would do. I would also probably try to dry it in the dark or darker kind of place. It's because you want this blue to really, really set in. And a lot of times people want to dry flowers. And I've said this before on the podcast, but I've also said it, I think, in different videos, that a lot of times people like to take their leftover flowers, which are past peak, and dry them. And that works for some flowers. Some different kinds of flowers, like statice or some other things, will dry well if you, you know, if they're past peak and you want to go ahead and dry them, because they still hold their shape and color integrity. But some flowers, like Echinops, I think really holds its blue. And honestly, sometimes I get dried Echinops in and I can't even tell the difference. The dried and the fresh look exactly the same. And a lot of times when people want fresh, we tell them, hey, we don't have fresh, it's out of season. Because the season on this isn't super long, but it's good. It's still a great cut flower. But I have it dried. And when I show it to them, I'm like, oh, that'll work, because they're just after this texture and this color. And both things maintain really well when you grow them. So this is Echinops, and like I said, it's one of the different kinds of thistles. It definitely has some poke to the leaves, so you want to be careful when you're cutting it or weeding, because you're going to get stuck a little bit from the foliage. But yeah, that's Echinops. All right. So now I've got another little flower here called, well, I always call it Marco Polo, and I don't know if you've ever done that, but Marco Polo is in the bachelor button family, like Centaurea, I think is its genus, if I pronounce that right. And so like cornflowers and some different kinds of asters. I'm thinking like, I can't think of the name of the one that's kind of lavender, but this is actually in the bachelor button family. And when it comes in, it's kind of tight. So like you can kind of see that this, and the foliage is a little bit yellow on this one because I've had this for a little bit, saving it for today for y'all so you can have them. But you see, I've actually heard people call this incorrectly like a pineapple flower because of this base. You can kind of see where it has like this brown, and it's actually very dry. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but it is really kind of cool. And then it just opens up. Like you might see different kinds of thistles do this kind of opening, and this is the same deal. It is so pretty. And here's an example. Here, you can see, I'll pull this off. So this is what the bud looks like when it opens. Kind of reminds me of like a praying mantis little egg sac that they leave on branches that they all hatch out in the spring. But they open up into these really beautiful, oh, look at this one. Really beautiful yellow balls. And this flower has been opening for probably about a week, and it just keeps getting more and more pretty. But that's this. So we call this Marco Polo. It is, I think it's Centaurea macrophyllum or something like that. It's just, it's a big Centaurea, so macro, think of that. And when you Google it, you can find it. But this again is another one of those flowers that is great. And when you're making bouquets for markets or doing design work, a lot of times people want pin cushions because they're proteas and they last a long time. Well, I feel like this is something that anybody can just about grow. We can't all grow proteas because of where we're located climate-wise, but this kind of gives that same kind of yellow ball feel, and it's just such a happy flower because it's so bright and yellow. So there's some new flowers for you. Now I want to take a minute and gotta smell the mint one more time because it smells so good. And I want to talk about some dahlias. And I've got a bucket here that I need to, oh my goodness. So our grower that supplies us with these beauties, let me just do it this way. She a lot of times will have some stems left over that she brings us so we can look at, test, see, and kind of play with. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to bring them in today for you guys so you can see them and let me know what you think. I know that some of these varieties are varieties that, sorry guys, that some of these varieties are varieties you might grow. And when you're looking to evaluate what kind of dahlias to grow, sometimes it's really great to get just some feedback from someone like myself that has sold quite a few over the years. And we sell them to everyone from, consumers just walking in to retail flower shops doing all kind of work, people doing funerals, people doing weddings, which is probably where we sell the most of them, is people doing weddings. And so a lot of times we're kind of looking and looking for specific color palettes. But one thing I noticed the other day, and I want to say it was this variety, right? Well, this is a great one. It's easy for me to get to. But I don't know the names of all these varieties, so I apologize for that. But since I didn't grow them and these were just sort of onesies, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. I heard that last night. But flowers like this, dahlias like this, do an incredible job of bridging colors. So if you've got creams and pinks and peaches, and you're trying to find a way to connect those colors in a bouquet, in a wedding palette, like wedding arch, dahlias can sometimes be great flowers for that because they have an ability to pull in all these different colors. Like in this one, when you first see it, it definitely reads pink. It's kind of a light pink, but when you start seeing peaches come up against it, you start to see, oh, well, look, there's a little bit of peach in there too. And see, this is that coral fountain amaranthus, and you see how that starts to connect. Let's see what happens if we put some blue echinops up next to it. Yeah, you don't see it quite as much. It looks definitely more pink now. So it's all about bridging colors, and dahlias do a great job of that. Now, this dahlia is kind of a, I'm going to say a smallish kind of size. It's not super big. It's not a dinner plate. And I want to point that out because a lot of times people want to grow dahlias because they're after that big drama dinner plate. And the thing you need to keep in mind is sometimes those dinner plates, in fact, most of the times, because they're putting so much energy into those big, huge flowers, they don't produce as many. So you may get more per stem, like dollar value wise, when you're selling to like me, a wholesaler or a florist, or putting them in a bouquet. You may get more per stem, but do you get the stem count? So this might be a little bit less expensive variety, but it might produce twice as many stems, which is a huge, huge value when you're putting the same energy into it. Plus, when there's smaller blooms like this, and you have wind and rain and storms or various things that can happen, that big heavy flower doesn't always weather well. It's a lot of times will break because of the weight of water in the flower, or bugs get into it. And so like here is a cafe au lait. I'm gonna pull this foliage off so you can really see it good. 1 second. I can do it without breaking it. Here we go. Okay, so here's a cafe au lait, and here is this. So you can see it's a huge, huge difference in size. But if you get 2 to 3 times more flowers from this size versus this size, where do you really make more money? Plus, sometimes people get scared. They don't know how to use it because it's so flat. You can see like where the stem was growing, how flat this flower is. And I think sometimes that is hard for a designer to use. If you're putting it at an angle where it's facing out, that's great, but then you've got this whole back thing going on. So depending on how you're using it might depend on whether this is actually good. Having a ball flower that is really kind of pretty on all sides, and yes, it still has a flat side, but you see how it arches back? I don't know if you can tell that. And so that's definitely a fuller, probably easier to use, more usable flower than our big beauty cafe au lait. So I want to show you another variety. This is a variety that this grower is trialing. Now, I don't know the name of this variety, like I said, but you can see here, let me pull this back a little bit. So you can see that this one is a smaller variety than even this. And the frustrating thing about some varieties like this that are smaller, they may even produce more, but when you go to design with them, sometimes this takes a whole lot more of these because they don't get the coverage that a dahlia like this that's fuller and more round will take. So you want to really watch your size balance. There is a sweet spot, and sometimes I tend to be scared of smaller varieties like this because I think the perceived value, it's like a rose versus a spray rose. The perceived value per stem a lot of times is less because they're little tiny flowers and they don't get the same coverage. I mean, they do a different function. They don't have that wow factor a lot of times, but they're great fillers. This is kind of like that. And I just don't, I think if I was going to grow dahlias, I had a limited space, I'd want something that has more curb appeal. So let me show you some other varieties. This is a different one, but you're going to see it has a little more yellow in it. And I was always really afraid of yellow and dahlias. For the longest time, every yellow dahlia that I saw, And it was just my own ignorance, okay? I think of highlighter color yellow, and I get really, really nervous about that. And then I got educated on some beautiful yellows that are not that neon highlighter color, but they almost have peaches in them. So let me see if I have, so this is the variety that has some yellow and peach in it. This was the second one that I had. And you can tell the difference of how peachy gold that is. And I think that's really important. Also, here is more of that hanging amaranthus, and you can see that there's enough of that tone in there that it still ties in. So again, look at this. This has formed a complete ball, almost closed in the back, and it's totally usable that way. I think it's great. That's a great one. Here is another color. And a lot of times these colors, like the very first of the season versus later in the season. But these are colors that I think are really popular. And I don't know the name, so I can't give it to you. But I wanted to let you know that a lot of times you don't think of colors like this. Like, okay, it's not pink, it's not a good wedding color, right? But when you have so many varieties of colors and roses and things that people are trying to blend and tie in together, having these kinds of colors that bridge those colors again together are really great. So even that, which I wouldn't normally put together, I don't think it's bad. Look, here's that amaranthus again. Not something I would normally do, but not awful. But you can also see, here's some more of these peaches. Isn't that incredible? Look at that. I mean, those three together, wow. I mean, that's the kind of interest that you can create with dahlias. So a lot of times we get a great burgundy. This is kind of a small one, but burgundy is such a popular color for the sweet spot of dahlias. I would say probably starting late August, around 1st of September, all the way through the wedding season. This and peaches and cream are probably our two most popular colors that we sell in dahlias. The fact it's small kind of made me nervous at first, but people embrace them because they just want that little pop of color. And you don't want to use too much, because if you're doing big arrangements and you use something super dark, a lot of times it creates holes in your designs. In a wedding, it's in the evening and the lighting maybe isn't as great, and you don't want to create those holes. Let me pull up this color and put those together. And I think those are really cool too. So what do you think? Do you like burgundy? Well, it was interesting because in this bucket, there was also, let me see, there was this other variety of burgundy. And here we go. So here's the one I just showed you, and here is this one. And you can see the colors are almost identical. This one's a little bit bigger, but the other thing I really love about this, I don't know if you can see it really well, but it's almost got this kind of cool peony scabiosa center to it. I'm sure there's a technical term for it that I don't know, but I think that adds a totally different look, having that full center. I had two of them like that. Here's another one. I need to recut these. But look at this. I mean, isn't that incredible? I mean, it looks like a cross between a chrysanthemum, a scabiosa, and a dahlia. Wow, that's just awesome. White dahlias are always popular. And so I just wanted to take a second, and this is a cafe au lait. This is a smaller cafe, and you can see how white it is. But white dahlias are really kind of tricky. And even though it's such an in-demand dahlia, you really want to be careful because these are like magnets for bugs. And if I was gonna net one, it's probably gonna be white because it's just so much work to have one little pest kind of, mar your bloom. But you want to look for varieties that produce well in your area. And some of these varieties just don't do well because they don't like the heat or the bug pressure. And so find a variety that works well in your area. You might trial maybe 10 different whites. And you might say, oh my gosh, out of these 10, these two go to town. They love it here. They go crazy. They're just gigantic and amazing. But this is not a super big bloom again. So let me show you the cafe au lait. But I think it's easier to work with because it's not gigantic. And these are going to be great producers. I happen to know this variety was an awesome producer for our local grower, and that's why she went with it. So there is that variety. Let me see if I have any more little treasures in this bucket. Here's one that's more of a true pink. What do y'all think of this? It's kind of got a little bit of salmon in it, but I think the salmon is, it's just a great color. You know, if you take, let's just take a second here and play a little bit. So here's this mountain mint with that silver and that gray. Here is the burgundy. And look at those two colors together. I mean, it's like burgundy and pink. Wouldn't normally put it together, but it's really kind of nice. And then I've got to show you this guy here. This is the one we showed earlier, but look at these two colors together. I mean, wow. I mean, that creates a depth of color that you have sometimes a difficult time doing, but there are so many amazing dahlias, and a lot of times people look at them and they're like, oh my gosh, these are all the same. Like there's a lot of similar varieties, like with these two here. I mean, they seem very similar, but can you tell the difference? One has more yellow, one is more pink, and that's the kind of subtle difference that can bring an entire palette for a wedding together. It's just really, really beautiful. And so yeah. So when you're looking for dahlias, don't necessarily look for the biggest. If you're looking for dahlias, Cafe Olé is still the #1 selling, but I think a lot of that is because people just expect it, or they think, oh wow, I need to have that super, super fabulous big peony, I'm sorry, dahlia. And it is pretty fabulous, but it may not give you the numbers that some of these smaller varieties will. So don't necessarily go for the biggest blooms. Sometimes it's good to look for production and how many stems do you get out of a particular plant. And one last thing, just as a side note, I want to share. A lot of times these buds from dahlias, they may not open, but I think they create great texture and movement when you're working on bouquets. So anyway, I just wanted to go live today and share some of these flowers that maybe you haven't grown before, and when you are growing dahlias, things to look for, so that way you can make the most out of the plants and production that you have. So if you just joined us late, feel free to go back and watch this from the beginning. Make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube, because we're continuing to produce this kind of content. So people that are looking for input on what to grow, how to grow, and colors and things, they can have a resource for that. And don't forget to subscribe to the Flower Podcast, where we talk to flower lovers, farmers, designers all over the world, and sharing their insights and their stories so we can all learn from it. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great weekend. Take care and happy flowering.